Business, we've been looking at the big issues ahead of budget and the big projects that may not feature but will eventually have to be paid for. Nuclear energy, one of them, contentious in South Africa, but Eskom is pushing ahead with plans, it says, to procure 9,600 megawatts of new power. Another big project is the National Health Insurance. Well, earlier we spoke to Professor Alex van den Heeven from the Wit School of Governance, who's looked extensively at the NHI, and Professor of Physics, Hartmut Winkler from the University of Johannesburg. Are we on nuclear? So Cabinet has approved this and Eskom is now doing the groundwork, the requests for proposals. However, Treasury keeps on saying it has to be affordable. Yes. My question is, can Treasury, can the Finance Minister stop this from going ahead right now?
Well, right now they should, and primarily because at the moment we've just still busy debating the integrated resource plan that's just been put up for discussion. And according to that plan, the country doesn't need nuclear energy until 2037, so 20 years from now. What that means is, because it takes a while to build these power stations, is that we don't actually need to make any decision about whether we should start building the nuclear facilities now or not. We can actually wait for another 10 years. So if this plan is approved, okay, it's still up for debate, but I guess in the next month or two, it's probably going to be finalized. It might even find that the nuclear implementation date can be pushed further. But the end result is that I think Eskom is really jumping the gun right now, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, because haven't we already found, I think there was an update to that resource plan in 2013, and then the Department of Energy was saying we could wait maybe till 2025, I think, or even 35.
That's
but
right.
Since then, Cabinet has approved this. So there is a sense that there's political will for this, isn't there?
There is, but these integrated resource plans are only meant to be of relatively short duration. The energy space is constantly changing. The prices of some of the technologies are either dropping or at least changing quite rapidly. So for that reason, what should happen is that this plan needs to be revised roughly every 2 years. So right now, yes, the government has said they would like to go ahead with it, but they haven't said when. And according to last year's SONA address, the statement was made that it would go ahead at the pace and scale that the country can afford. Now, okay, that can be interpreted in many ways. That could also be interpreted as meaning that we're going to do this in 10 or 20 years, or that we're just going to start on a very, very small, modest scale. But what Eskom is proposing is launching right into this now, and that would be an extremely expensive exercise with long-term consequences for the economy.
All right, and you're saying jumping the gun. We'll come back to that on your expectations for budget. But Alex, what about the NHI? So years ago, there were talks of alarming costs, that everybody would have to fork out new taxes, but it has seemed to be a very slow approach. We're now still in the first phase. What do you expect from this budget? Any pronouncement on the NHI?
I don't expect any announcement, certainly with financial implications in this budget. The white paper was released last year, and it was a very superficial white paper, which did not actually outline many of the financial aspects, both the necessity for the tax increases and also how it would be spent and what it would be spent on. So there are huge gaps in the proposals. And it's also unclear that the way in which it's framed is really targeted at the specific needs of the health system at this point in time. So I think that there's a lot of unclarity about the proposals, and I expect that as a consequence we will see very slow progress. Not much
said even in the budget.
Well, I think that I think that people will still, politically people are going to sort of maintain the rhetoric. But I think in terms of content, it's just not there. And it's
you are
unlikely to be there.
skeptical of the way it's being dealt with, and there are pilot projects. Just briefly outline what has gone wrong so far.
Well, the pilot projects were initiated without much planning and idea as to what would actually be piloted, what would be tested. And there is a need for South Africa to establish a district health authority system, which would be quite a decentralized autonomous system for handling primary care within the health system. It doesn't have to be under a national health insurance fund. But these pilots were theoretically pilots for district contracting, a so-called purchaser-provider split test. But it did so without actually testing accountability structures, platforms. It ran ahead without really knowing what they wanted to do. So essentially nothing has been achieved out of those pilots, and there is no clear idea of the institutional design, which you would have tested in them, as to what you would, no institutional design that you could now proceed with. So essentially nothing has been achieved with those. No financing framework, no governance approach.
Are there learnings?
Well, I think there's a lot to learn on how not to implement policy or how to initiate a policy process. I think throughout the National Health Insurance debate that the actual policy process itself has been deeply flawed. And if you had to think back that the proposals were being made in 2007 and it's now 2017, and there isn't even a light sketch of an institutional design or a coherent financing framework.
That was Professor Alex van den Heever and Professor Hartmut Winkler, and we'll look at the big budget issues for the duration of this week in primetime. Those were the big projects that may or may not come up, but do need to be paid for. Thank you for being with us tonight.